You guys should have your notes open. 1.4, we're solving quadratic equations. All right, you guys are going to have to use the quadratic formula. We're going to talk about 2 ways to solve quadratics today, completing the square and using the quadratic formula. We're going to get into imaginary numbers and stuff like that on Monday. But a quadratic equation, guys, has the 2 as the exponent. The highest exponent is squared. You guys have seen quadratics. We've been working with quadratics. How have we been solving quadratics? By what? Okay, getting out the greatest common factor. Then we've been factoring. They've all factored nicely and it's been good. All right, your quadratic equation is in standard form. If it goes x squared, then whatever's with x, then your constant equals 0. That is the first step when we're solving this. When you're using your quadratic formulas, you have to get it into standard form like this, okay? We're going to identify our a term, our b term, and our c term. A is the number that's in front of x squared. B is the number that's in front of x, and c is your constant. Everybody with me? All right, let's go. If I ask you to solve a quadratic, the first thing you should try and do is factor. And if it factors, go with it. If I have this problem, x squared plus 5x equals 24. So x squared plus 5x equals 24. Can I solve it exactly how it's set up? No. Why not? You have to move it around. We got to move 24 over here. It needs to be set equal to 0 so we can find the solution. So I have x squared plus 5x. When I move positive 24 to the other side, what does it become? So minus 24 equals 0. Agreed? Okay, good. Now we're going to say a times c. 1 times negative 24. Are there factors of negative 24 that multiply to give me negative 24, but add to give me a positive 5? 8 and 3. What kind of 8? What kind of 3? Positive 8, negative 3, right? And when we solve, guys, you set each piece equal to 0. So you would say x equals negative 8 and x equals positive 3. All right, that's the best case scenario, that something factors nicely and we can just move on to the next problem. You guys with me? All right, another way to solve an equation is by doing something called completing the square. Now, most of you probably have not seen this. If you have, great. If not, no worries. We're going to do a couple. And again, we're going to do a couple of each kind. We're going to practice it and then practice a whole bunch tomorrow. But if you were asked to solve letter A, all right, A says x squared minus 8x plus 13 equals 0. What did I tell you the first thing you should try to do? Try to factor it, okay? A times c. 1 times 13. Are there factors of 13 that are multiplied to give me 13 but add to give me negative 8? No. So gone are the days where you just go, oh, it doesn't factor. It has solutions. They're just not real pretty. So there's 2 ways to find these solutions. Notice it says real solutions. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's 2 ways to find the solutions. You can complete the square, or you can use the quadratic formula. So the first process that we're going to do is completing the square. You'll have to do this on your test. So rewrite your problem. It's x squared. What was it? Plus 8? Minus 8. Minus 8x plus 13 equals 0. Okay? If we're going to complete the square, the first thing we do is make sure that everything is on one side and equals 0 is on the other. We good? All right. So this is the steps. This is what we do every time. All right? First thing, make sure your a term is 1. Is our a term 1? Yes. Okay, we're good. So we're going to first take the constant and move it to the other side. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 8x. I'm going to put plus a box. I'm going to put my square. When I move 13 over, it becomes what? Negative 13. And what you do to one side of an equation, guys, you do where? So then I'm going to put plus and then another box. All right, so our next step, you're going to take your b term. What's my b term? Negative 8. Negative 8, just the number in front. You're going to take your b term, negative 8, and divide it by 2. And that's going to tell you everything you need. What is negative 8 divided by 2? Negative 4. So when we complete the square, we're trying to make a perfect square trinomial. So on the left-hand side here, I have my x, and then I know it's going to be -4, and it's squared. We have just completed the square. We are creating a perfect square trinomial, and I'll show you what I mean in 1 second.
Where did you get the 2 from?
That's what you do. You take the b term and divide it by 2, always.
Oh, it's b equals a.
Hmm?
It's b divided by 2 equals a. Is that the...
So now I got to figure out, well, what goes in my box? Well, since we're completing the square, you need to square this number. What is -4 squared? Positive 16. What you put on one side of the equation, you have to put where? On the other. So what we've done, guys, do you see this trinomial right here? If you were to factor that, -4 times -4 gives me a positive 16 when I multiply and a -8 when I add. So we have just completed the square here. And this will work every single time. Yes, sir?
When you get the x minus 4 squared?
You're taking this trinomial
Oh,
and all we did was just make an equivalent expression. That's it.
So you don't have to, like, solve it?
Well, now we're going to finish, yeah.
Oh, okay.
What's -13 plus 16?
Positive 3.
Positive 3. And now we're just going to solve for x. How do you solve for x? How do you get rid of a squared?
Both sides.
You take if I take the square root of one side, I have to do it where? To the other. Good. So I have x minus 4 equals. When I put the square root sign on a number, what goes in front of it?
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus √3. And then what's the last step?
Add 4 to both sides.
Add 4 to both sides. So my answer here, my two x values are going to be 4 plus or minus the square root of 3. The reason you can't factor this is because nobody in here would have told me that 4 plus √3 and 4 minus √3 would be your solutions just by multiplying a times c. Completing the square will work every time. So much more complicated when a is not 1. I'll show you an easier way to do it, but we're not going to get into anything very, very intricate like that.
Yeah, where did you get 3 from?
-13 plus 16. We're going to do a bunch of these. Let's look at the next one.
Double question.
Yep.
So you
Alright.
can't do it the way you just the factoring?
This doesn't factor.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to give you ones that don't factor. Look at b. 3x squared. What does b say? 3x squared. What is it? -12x and a positive 6 equals 0. All right, and I told you guys, for completing the square, we're only going to complete the square where our a term is 1. And it's going to be nice and pretty. So what could I divide everything by so my a term was 1? 3. Okay, look, if I divide everything by 3, I'm left with x squared minus, what's 12 divided by 3? 4x. 6 divided by 3 is equals 0. Yes.
You don't have to take out the 3, like, in parentheses.
Now look, that's a good question. I am taking out this 3, right? You guys agree? I'll just leave it there for a second. I'll show you why you don't have to do anything with it. All right, now I'm going to factor this. That's the first thing I'm going to try to do is factor. Are there factors of positive 2 that multiply to give me a positive 2, but add to give me -4?
Yes. Yes.
What are the factors of 2? 1 and 2, right? Factors of 4 that'll give us 2, but not the other way around. So this is why we have to use completing the square here, because it doesn't factor. So let's think about what we did. Again, you can keep that 3 out here if you want to.
You don't need it.
No, I'll show you why you don't need it. But how do we complete the square? What did we do with our b term? Not yet. Hold on. Okay, okay, you want to move the 2? That's fine. We'll move the 2 first. So let's move the 2. I'm left with x squared minus 4x plus what? A box equals, when I move that 2 over, what does it become? And then I put plus the box. We're gonna be fair on either side. We're gonna try and complete this perfect square trinomial. So take your b term, which is -4, and I divide it by what? Okay, it's gonna tell me everything I need. What's -4 divided by 2? -2, good. So what's gonna go in my parenthesis on the left-hand side? My parenthesis down here.
Oh, sorry.
x minus 2. Perfect. And it's squared because now, when we complete that perfect square trinomial, Sarah, what am I putting in the box?
4.
Yep, 4 is going to go there. And what you do to one side of the equation, you do where? To the other. And now we're just going to solve.
So you have to square that.
Yep, because if I were to FOIL this out, it would become that. What's negative 2 plus 4? 2. Now, guys, if this were to factor or something like that, we would set everything that we took out equal to 0, right? I took out a 3. If I say 3 equals 0, is that ever true? Nope. So that's why you don't have to include it in your answer. If there was an x with it, then yes. But if you just take out a number, it's gone. You factored it out. It has nothing to do with your solutions. Now, how do we solve this, guys? We're going to do the same thing we did just a minute ago. Take the square root of both sides. Good. So x, minus 2 equals, what goes in front of my square root of 2? Plus or minus.
X equals 2.
And then what do I do?
Square root, or plus or minus.
I'm going to add 2 on both sides. So I get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And again, we use completing the square because that doesn't factor pretty. We will do a bunch of these tomorrow, I promise, but you do the same thing every time. One sec. You move the constant to the other side. You add a box on either side. You take the b term, divide by 2, then that creates the left-hand side parenthesis. You square it, add it to both sides, and then solve. Yes, sir.
Suppose you get like plus or minus like the square root of 36, you have to simplify that, right?
All right, questions? What is this thing?
Quadratic.
The quadratic formula. Now, whether something factors or not, right? If something factors pretty, we like to factor it. If it doesn't factor pretty, we can think you use completing the square. But what will work every single time is the quadratic formula. But the quadratic formula can be lengthy. So if you can factor something or you can complete the square, it's a little easier. On your quiz or your test, I will tell you, you have to do the following. It's either going to be completing the square or using the quadratic formula. Yes, ma'am.
So if you don't use the quadratic formula, you can just find square.
Say it again.
So if you don't use the quadratic formula, you can just find square.
You can use completing the square, but you can only use completing the square when the a term is 1, like when the number in front of x squared is 1. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it doesn't work where you can just divide everything pretty. And then you end up with a fraction that you then have to cut in half and square, and it's just awful.
So you're gonna give us the.
That's why we're doing this, yeah.
You're gonna give us the
This is what
pretty
you
one?
do if you can't do that.
For completing the square, yeah.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is what you do if you don't have a 1 in your name.
Well, I'll show you in a second. But guys, the quadratic formula, okay? This is not hard. It's just a matter of you guys have to keep yourself organized. If you don't know the formula, then yeah, you're going to have an issue. Every single one of you in here can learn 52 million songs. When Drake comes out with his new album, it's like, oh, I know every song. Half of you could sing every single song to Donda to me right now. But if I ask you what the quadratic formula is, oh my God, it's so hard, I can't do it. Yes, you can, right? Go on YouTube. There are a million quadratic formula songs. And I don't mean like a nursery song that my 4-year-olds listen to, like to Adele, to Jason Derulo. Like there's a bunch of different songs that if you just listen to it enough, it'll just get stuck in your head and then you'll be like, oh, I remember it. That's good, okay? But this is our quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. A is your coefficient of x squared. B is your coefficient of x to the first power, and c is your constant, okay? So let's look at these next problems. The reason why completing the square doesn't work is, what did I tell you that your a term needed to be in order to complete the square? 1. So in the second example I gave you, we divided everything by 3 and everything was fine, right? If I divide everything here by 3, do you guys then want to have to take 5/3 and divide it by 2 and then square it and then move it to the other side? You absolutely can do that. But some of you, as soon as I put a fraction in front of you, just immediately shut down. So here is another tool you can use to solve a quadratic equation? I'm not going. I'm calling everybody out on that one there, kiddo. All right, so look, let's do A together. 3x squared minus 5x minus 1 equals 0. On your test, I promise you, I will say, use completing the square. Use quadratic formula. So you don't have to decide what you should do. I will tell you what to do. Notice it says find all the real solutions. What other kind of solutions are there? They're not fake.
Imaginary?
Imaginary, yes, imaginary. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But they're asking here for the real solutions. So again, if you got this on an SAT or an ACT, the first thing you should try and do is factor it. Are there factors of -3 that multiply to give me -3 but add to give me -5? No. So then you can say, well, maybe I can complete the square. Can I divide everything by 3 and have nice, pretty whole numbers to work with? No. So what do we have to use? Quadratic formula, okay? First thing you need to do, make sure that everything is in standard form on one side of the equation. So I have x squared, x, and a constant, right? If it's not in that order, move it. Now let's figure out what our A term is, what our B term is, and what our C term is. What is A? 3. What is B? -5. And what is C? -1. Okay, that wasn't too hard. The next thing you should do, and I mean like 100 times you should do this, is write the formula. Don't just take a screenshot of it and just paste it. You should actually write it so your brain gets used to writing the same thing. Because the hardest part of solving these problems is going from writing the formula to getting all the numbers where they should be with the correct signs. That's the hardest part. Yeah. And you'll see, if you stay organized, if you take your time, this is not a hard process. But when you guys try and skip steps, you try and, in my mind, oh, 2 negative, make a positive, then you guys get yourselves confused. So just don't do that. Take the first step to just plug in everything exactly like you see it. So I have negative, what's my B term? No, my B term is what? -5, okay? So it's -5. I understand some of you see 2 negatives and make it a positive. I suggest you don't skip steps like that just yet. So we have plus or minus. This first thing, you should always put in parentheses, b squared. Put it in parentheses, whether it's a positive or a negative. Just get in the habit of it. -4 times, what's my A term? 3. What's my C term? -1. And I'm going to divide all of it by 2 times what? 3. Take a second. Make sure you got everything right, all your signs and everything. We miss one sign, everything gets messed up. Now simplify a little bit. A -5 is what? 5. Perfect. Plus or minus. What is -5 squared? 25. What's -4 times 3? -4 times 3 times -1, positive 12, divided by 2 times 3 is 6. Questions? Okay, scoot a little bit over. I have 5 plus or minus. What is 25 plus 12? 37. Divided by 6. Can I break the square root of 37 down? So that's it. Those are my 2 answers. Those are 2 roots. X equals 5 plus the square root of 37 over 6. And 5 minus the square root of 37 over 6. Do you guys see how I have 2 real solutions? I have 2 real solutions. We're going to talk about that in 1 second. Good job. I'm glad you said that. It does have a little eye. We'll talk about that one in 1 second. All right, let's do B. Yeah.
So you have to put 2 real solutions, like in there?
Not right now, but for the next thing we're talking, I'm bringing that to everybody's attention.
Okay.
What does B say? Read B to me, please.
4x squared
4x squared
plus 12x
plus 12x
plus 9 equals 0.
plus 9 equals 0. All right, first step, make sure everything is on the same side, yes? All right, so I have x squared, x 9, and then equals 0. All right, identify your A, B, and C. Yeah.
Did we take a question like that on the quiz? Actually, no, because this is not the, never mind.
You didn't have any that didn't factor. A term is what? 4. B term is 12. C term is 9. So our quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square, God bless you, b squared minus 4ac, God bless you, all over 2a. All right, let's fill in. What's my b? So I have negative 12 plus or minus 12 squared minus 4 times, what's a? Times c, which is all over 2 times 4. Yep. Okay, I'm not asking anybody to do anything in their head yet. Nothing, just kind of work along with me. So I have negative 12 plus or minus. Guys, what is 12 squared? 144. Good. And then I have a negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 times 9. If you don't know that, watch. 16 times 9. 9 times 6 is 54. Whoops. 9 times... It is, hold on. All right, so 6 times 9 is 54. I was trying to get that 5 to go away, and then everything went away. So, right, carry the 5. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 5 is... Okay, so I have 144 minus 144. All over 2 times 4 is 8. Simplify a little more. Negative 12 plus or minus. What is 144 minus 144? 0. All right. Over 8. Guys, what's the square root of 0? 0. So this just ends up being negative 12 over 8.
You don't have to do the plus or minus.
No, because plus or minus 0 doesn't do anything.
Oh, it's for the square root?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what's negative 12 over 8? What can I simplify that to? Divide by 4, and I get negative 3 over 2. How many solutions did I get there?
1.
Just one solution. Okay. I don't have the plus or minus root because I got 0 underneath my square root. So that gave me one real solution. Can somebody read C to me, please? X squared.
1/3
The,
x squared plus 2x plus 2
plus 2x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, the first thing we would try and do is, well, yeah, we're going to identify, but if you guys just had this just as a plain question, you try and factor it, which it doesn't. You could use completing the square here because your A term is 1 and everything else is nice and pretty, which is fine, but we're going to use the quadratic formula. So everything's where it should be. X squared, x, and constant are all on the same side. Everything's set equal to 0. So A equals what? 1. B equals 2. And C equals 2. Our numbers are nice and small. We like that. So let's write our formula. X equals, everybody say it with me, negative, yep, plus or minus, B squared minus, all over, good. Now let's just fill in. Negative b, so negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, c is 2, all over 2 times 1. All right, let's simplify. Negative 2 plus or minus, what's 2 squared? 4. And then I have negative 4 times 1 is? Times 2? Negative 8. All over 2 times 1 is 2. Okay?
Oh, you're right.
So negative 2 plus or minus. Guys, what's 4 minus 8? Negative 4 over 2. Does anybody see an issue here?
Yes.
What? This 4 underneath right here makes it what kind of an answer? Imaginary. All right?
That would be our answer in imaginary.
No. We'll talk about that in a second. If they ask you, if you guys go look back up here, what does it say to find all the what? Real solutions. If your directions say find the real solutions, what would you answer here? That there's no real solutions
It's imaginary because there's a negative.
underneath the square root. We're going to talk about this a little more tomorrow and a little more on Monday. But it's there's no real solutions. But we're going to, on Monday, actually go forth and solve this. Because the square root of -4, and we'll talk about this more, is -1 times 4. What is the square root of 4? 2. And what's the square root of -1? I. It's imaginary. So your answer here on your test, when I ask you to tell me the solutions, whether they're real or imaginary, you guys would do this. Plus or minus 2i over 2. And then it'll simplify to -1 plus or minus I. But what I wanted you to see is if it asks for real solutions, as soon as you can get here, you can say, oh, wait, there's no real ones. How come? Why is this not real? Because there's a negative underneath. So let's look back at this for a second. Because Riley just asked a really good question. Look at our answers. We did 3 problems. Look at our answers. How many solutions did I get in the first problem? 2. How many did I get in the second problem?
1.
And how many real ones did I get in the third problem? Look at underneath the square root. What kind of a number is 37? Positive or negative? Positive. What did I get under the square root here? What did I get under the square root here? 0. And then what did I get here? A negative. When you have a positive number underneath the square root, you'll get 2 real solutions. When you get 0 underneath the square root, you'll only have 1 real solution. And if you get a negative number underneath the square root, you'll have no real solutions. They'll be imaginary. And that's what this next slide is. You guys are going to be asked to do something called the discriminant. All right, you'll have a question on your test that says, hey, solve this by completing the square. You'll have a couple that you have to use the quadratic formula. I'm going to tell you to. But there's also going to be a question or two that says use the discriminant to tell me how many solutions and what kind of solutions they are. This is not a new formula, guys. Have you seen this before? Where is it? It's in the quadratic formula. It's what's underneath the square root. It's called the discriminant. So there's 3 rules. It says if d is greater than 0, then the equation has 2 distinct real solutions. What that means is if your discriminant, if this thing underneath the square root is a positive number, if it's positive, you have 2 real solutions. If b squared minus 4ac, when you work it out, becomes 0. If it's 0, then you have 1 real solution. If you work out the discriminant, the b squared minus 4ac, and you get a negative number. I can't spell. Negative, you have no real solutions.
So we say no solutions or imaginary?
No real solution. If you told me you'd have imaginary, I'd take that too. That's fine.
I was going to say.
So this should be an easy question for you guys, or 2 on your test. You're not working out the whole formula. It's just going to say, all right, use the discriminant to determine how many real solutions each problem has. Use the discriminant. Well, guys, what's the discriminant? B squared minus 4ac. Just the piece underneath the square root. Does not include the square root. It's just the piece underneath it. So if you have question A, all right, A says x squared plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. Now, they're not asking you to solve it. They want to know how many solutions and what kind they are. So go through the same process. Is everything on the same side? Yes. Set equal to 0. Yes. So let's determine what A is, what B is, and what C is. Perfect. Now we're going to use the discriminant. We're just figuring out what types and how many of solutions we have. What is my b term? So I have 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1. What's 4 squared? 16. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 1.
Positive 4?
Plus 4. So my answer is 20. Is that my answer?
No.
No. I don't care what the value of the discriminant is numerically, but that tells me something about my solutions. What does it tell me? That I have 2 real solutions. Good, Isa. 2 real solutions. That's what you guys just showed me. Good question. Let's look at B. Somebody read B to me, please. 4x squared
Minus 12x
minus 12x
plus 9
plus 9 equals 0. Okay? Again, I just want to know how many solutions and what type it is. They are, sorry. B squared minus 4ac, your discriminant. A is 4, B is negative 12, and C is 9, correct? Okay. So I have negative 12 squared minus 4 times 9. What's negative 12 squared? 144. Have we already done 4 times 9 already?
Yeah.
What was it? 144. What's 144 minus 144? 0. I don't care that the value is 0 numerically, but what does that tell me about the types of solutions I have? I have 1 real solution. Good job. Very good. Very good, guys. All right, what does C say? I'm going to do C over here. Hold on, let me do it over here. What's C?
1/3 x squared
Mm-hmm.
minus 2x plus 4 equals 0.
All right, first of all, we see 1/3. That scares some of us, right? If you would like to get rid of it, you can. Does anybody know how? Okay, very good. Multiply. You'd have to multiply everything by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 1/3? 3. So look, if I go through and multiply everything by 3, well, 3 times 1/3 cancels out, so I'm left with x squared, right? What's 3 times negative 2? So negative 6x. What's 3 times 4? 12. And then what's 3 times 0?
0.
Yeah. You guys can do that if you want to.
Do you multiply it?
Yeah, by the denominator. It just gets rid of everything. So now let's use the discriminant to figure out our solution. So A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is positive 12, right? What's my discriminant again?
3
B
squared
minus 4AC. Great. So I have negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. Agreed? Okay. What is negative 6 squared? 36. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 12. What's 36 minus 48? Negative 12. What does that tell me about my solutions? There's no real solution. Another way you guys could tell me that is what kind of a solution is it? It's an imaginary solution.
Are you gonna want us to pick one real?
No, for this case, it's either no real or too imaginary.
So the ones we were doing before isn't no real, it's imaginary. The ones we were doing the quadratic formula.
No, those are real. Those were all, they were real and imaginary. The one that had the negative in it was imaginary.
So we can do no real or imaginary.
It depends on what they're asking you. This question is saying use the discriminant to determine how many solutions.
Oh,
So they want to know the types and how many. The other question is what are the x's? So whether it's real or not, we'll talk about. But so tonight, guys, I want you, just the homework that's there, I want you to screenshot every question from WebAssign. Actually work them out. It does you no good to get it from somebody else. You guys have to practice this. And then tomorrow in class, we're going to practice a whole bunch, I promise.